Stories create connections between people and experiences. Stories work for all kinds of learners, and psychologists tell us that information relayed in the form of a story is 20 times more likely to be remembered. It's no wonder that storytelling has taken the world of marketing by storm, and if you want to become a master storyteller, you have to hone your craft. This video is all about the nuances and core practices of becoming a great storytelling writer. As you seek to develop your own methods and approaches to writing stories, you should know this. There are basically three types of storytelling writers: discoverers, or outliners, or a combination of the two. George R.R. Martin calls discovery storytellers gardeners and outliners architects. And that's a good way to look at it. Discovery storytellers essentially are along for the ride. They themselves are discovering as they go and creating and planting something that grows over time. Architects are a lot more rigid and constructed. It depends on which kind of learner you are and the approach to writing you already have as you develop the method by which you will tell great stories. Every story has four basic components: plot, character, setting, and conflict. And the conflict is the part you have to focus on the most. Without obstacles to overcome, your characters don't do anything, right? So the obstacle can be as simple as what to cook for dinner and as difficult as finding the ring. The plot is essential, but the character development happens in the context of conflict, and there are 7 basic types of conflict. Character versus character. So this is like hero versus villain, family disputes, romantic entanglements. Character versus self, like the Hunger Games. Character versus nature. We're talking like Twister, Jaws, The Perfect Storm. Character versus technology, like iRobot, Terminator, or a story about an old person trying to use an iPhone. Character versus society, like The Handmaid's Tale or 1984. Character versus the supernatural, like Stranger Things or Dracula. Character versus fate. These are stories that often deal with God or prophecies or Greek tragedies, also Harry Potter. Most stories have several types of conflict going on at once. This increases the stakes of what the characters have to go through and overcome in order to succeed. One of the first things you have to decide when you sit down to tell a story is what point of view you are going to tell it from. Now, you don't have to stick to this rigidly. If you've read Game of Thrones, you know that every chapter is told from a different person's point of view. However, it is important that you've established the kind of point of view for each section of content in your narrative. Your point of view options are first person, which is I language, second person, you language, third person limited, in which the person is speaking about their experience, but they don't have a high level understanding of what's going on and they don't have all the information, or omniscient. So this is typically a narrator who's using the construct of the story to give the reader extra insight that the characters don't have. Once you decide how you're going to tell your story and from what point of view, you need to establish the plot. And plot structure has 3 elements. The first is promises. So in the beginning of a story, you need to make promises about what the story is going to contain. Chekhov's principle is really important for this. The gun principle is the idea, or the pistol principle is the idea that if there is a pistol hung on the wall in the first chapter, at some point that pistol needs to be fired. So you make promises to your reader in the beginning of a story that will pay off through the course of the plot. The second element of plot is progress, and this kind of goes without saying, but things need to happen for people to care about it, right? So this includes character arcs. Most characters go through a journey. Now, not all of them do. James Bond has never changed, but for the most part, unless a character is very recognizable and has kind of this stamp of global understanding, they need to go through a journey. So you need to keep the story moving through progressive elements in the plot. And then there's the payoff. This is the third element of plot, and it's basically where you make good on all the promises and you bring conclusion to the progression of the story. It's helpful as a writer to know that there are established archetypes for plot. To be honest, there are really only 5 types of plot archetypes that you will use as you develop a story. And they are: number 1, monster in the house. So this is like Alien. In advertising, we use this as the obstacle to overcome. So a lot of times like germs or plaque or grime personified is the monster in the house. The second is rags to riches, which would be like a Pygmalion or a My Fair Lady story. In advertising, we talk about how can a product or service elevate someone from who they were to who they are, the tired housewife to the triumphant woman, etc. Number 3 is the quest, Lord of the Rings. In advertising, the hero might embody the values of a brand, or a product might be what the hero needs to complete their quest. Number 4 is voyage and return. This is like a story like Finding Nemo. In advertising, we talk about how can a product or service transform someone or expand their worldview. Character arcs are really key in that type of plot archetype. And then the last is rebirth, like Beauty and the Beast. In advertising, we talk about how can a product or service help someone reconnect to themselves or find their true self. The genre in which you apply a plot archetype really shifts it, obviously. Heist, romance, you have all these different opportunities to kind of color the plot archetype, but knowing there are these established structures will help you get through your story a lot faster. And then because I'm a marketing copywriter, I want to talk a little bit about how we use storytelling and how storytelling shows up in common marketing practices. A really good indication of this is in taglines and log lines for movies. So if you think about it, marketing storytelling a lot of times is selling another story. So if you have a brand story, storytelling about the brand is part of what you will do, but that's really an exercise that you do maybe once or twice in the course of a brand. What you will mostly tell stories about is how this brand impacts people's lives, and there are endless ways to tell that story. So taking kind of a page out of the book of how people advertise movies, which are huge stories, is a great way for us to sharpen our marketing storytelling skills. So let's talk about taglines first. Taglines are marketing copy for films. Usually they're written by copywriters, and they usually include the main hook or point of a story. For instance, here are some fun examples. Finding Nemo. The tagline for that was, "There are 3.7 trillion fish in the ocean. They're looking for one." I can't say it like they do. The 40-year-old virgin. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. Alien. In space, no one can hear you scream. Okay, I'm not a voice actress, but you get the idea. These are like a very, very brief way to sum up what a story is about. They're also clever and interesting, and they are a hook that tells you a little bit about what you're going to experience and incentivizes you to learn more. Great, great, great learnings for ad copy here. Next are log lines. And actually, when we do storytelling training in my company, writing log lines is a really, really fun competitive activity that we do, because writing a log line really helps you hone in on like what is the most essential core messaging and how can I say it in as few words as possible. So here are some fun examples. The logline for American Beauty. A depressed suburban father in a midlife crisis decides to turn his hectic life around after becoming infatuated with his daughter's attractive friend. I really should have hired a voice actor to do these. Okay. Silence of the Lambs. In my voice, it's gonna not sound very intense. A young FBI cadet must confide in an incarcerated and manipulative killer to receive his help on catching another serial killer who skins his victims. And The Hangover. A Las Vegas set comedy centered around three groomsmen who lose their about-to-be-wed buddy during their drunken misadventures, then must retrace their steps in order to find him. So short-form copy can be found anywhere, and if you're a good storyteller and you kind of develop these skills, you're going to be able to write killer ads and email opens and all these great forms of marketing copy. But now let's go back a little bit into storytelling and talk about the ultimate plot archetype, which is the hero's journey. And for this, I have to give credit to Adele McKenna, who is the storytelling expert at Hire a Writer. She performed this training first for my team, and I thought it was absolutely invaluable and everybody needed to hear it. The Monomyth. This is a very, very well-known construct and way to tell stories. Many experts think that it is the ultimate way to tell stories, and here's what it is. So I'm going to talk you through the graphic you see here because it's impossible to encapsulate in a better way. The monomyth essentially begins in a stable state, and then the hero is called to adventure. Most of the time, the hero will refuse the call, thinking they're inadequate or that they can't do what needs to be done. But then they're given some kind of supernatural or external aid. Once they cross the first threshold, you really reach a new point in the story. And often they're thrust into what will seem like an impossible situation, which is called the belly of the whale. The road of trials is key because this is part of the conflict that is essential to any plot and keeping it interesting. Often on the road of trials, the hero meets their first point of despair and then meets with a goddess or some kind of external third-party magical person who imbues them with strength to continue, after which they are instantly tempted to once again abandon their quest. Often then, after that, about halfway through the story, there's some kind of atonement or reconciliation where the hero really accepts who they're going to become. After that, they often receive some kind of gift that's going to accelerate their progress towards salvation, towards resolution, towards winning whatever they're trying to do. The ultimate boon. And then there's the refusal of the return. So a lot of times at this point, a hero will be tempted to abandon their quest, but in a very, very convincing way, and make a strong statement that they're going to continue on. They have a magic flight, they're rescued from without, and after this, they're often going to cross a return threshold, after which point they become the master of two worlds and have the freedom to live how they want. Now, let's just be honest. The one thing we're all thinking is Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is a monomyth. It is one of the most familiar ways that we all understand this kind of story structure. Gandalf visits. They go through the road to trials. They encounter dragons. They encounter goddesses and temptresses and elves and helpers and tokens and gifts. And then at the end, they get to where they're the master of two worlds and they're sitting in the little mushroom thing. Okay, I'm not a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Point being, they're sitting at the end and they don't know what to do with their lives now that they're the master of two worlds. But the whole journey is really, really well typified by Tolkien's work and by Lord of the Rings. So if you're having trouble envisioning what the monomyth is, just watch Lord of the Rings again. But the point for us as storytellers in the monomyth and in all of these other constructs is this. Storytelling is powerful because it's coming of age, because it's change, and it's something that is a shared human experience regardless of where you are from, regardless of what you know, what language you speak, what culture you come from. Any of the contingent elements, this is shared human experience, the monomyth, the journey that people go through to overcome challenges, to work together, to arrive at a conclusion, to win. That is something that humans share, and that's why storytelling is so popular, and storytelling, the power of it will never change. If you can add storytelling to your repertoire and your skill set as a professional writer, you will go a long way. This is an immensely powerful tool for you, and I strongly urge you to spend time refining it, practicing it, learning how to write better stories. If you need more examples of how to become a great copywriter, more training, more tutorials, more insight, feel free to subscribe to my channel and definitely go visit our blog. Subscribe to that and you will get plenty more insight, both from me, my team, Adele, the storytelling expert, and everybody else who is ready to lend a hand to you in your journey to becoming a better copywriter.